G'day and welcome to another practice run at the Aussie Ideas Man. This time I'm not going to read a script, I'm going to try to just make comments from the top of my head as I also attempt to watch another video and evaluate it. I hope that this works out. Let's hope I got this right. I'm paused on a Aptera, the most efficient car sign, and I've got it paused there, so now I'm going to just say that while Aptera claims to be the most efficient car, it doesn't have one yet, and it hasn't proven from its prototypes that it's anywhere near the most efficient car. I have made many videos that discuss the reasons why I think it's not the most efficient car and a poor attempt at it. To begin with, if you were going to make the most efficient car or vehicle, it's not really a car, but if you were trying to make the most efficient vehicle somewhat like a car or a motorcycle, you would begin by having the passenger sit behind the driver. That way you lessen the overall width, and with less overall width, much less material to create wind resistance. So you'll get lower drag with a person behind the driver rather than beside. Putting a person beside the driver is just because people prefer it, but it has to be at the expense of efficiency. Another reason why it's not efficient is because in moving vehicles, weight inside the wheels, which is unsprung weight, is more inefficient the heavier the wheels get. And they put an extra 50 pounds in each of the front wheels, 100 pounds of unsprung weight extra, which is ridiculously inefficient. The other reason why they're not efficient, the most efficient, is because when they choose between a heat pump, they choose the cheaper radiant heater system. And the radiant heater system is about 5 times less efficient most of the time. And they make the excuse that they can't get parts for heat pumps, but it's just an excuse. Another reason why it's not efficient is because the wheels are unable to have any reduction gear through the motor. So the motor is always one-on-one, which is not right for electric motors because they don't get enough speed at the revs they get up to. So you're revving the living daylights out of them to get some speed. This is why it's got great acceleration but has a poor top speed. The only reason they can get 110 miles per hour is because they'll rev high, but it's very poor for performance. Another reason why they don't aim for the greatest efficiency is because when you paint a car, you get about roughly 20 years of endurance out in the open air with paints. When you wrap a car, you get somewhere up to 7 years, but the more you have it out in the sun, the less endurance you get out of wraps. And they chose to wrap it. This is not an aim to be the most efficient, but it's the cost cut for them. They don't want to put in a paint assembly in the production line. Another reason why they're not making the most efficient vehicle is because they don't have a vehicle that can stand the day-to-day temperatures that vehicles have to operate in. The thermal management system, or the skin cooling as they call it, just won't work. I believe it was the reason why it failed in the first place, and that lack of money was just an excuse. And this time around, we still have no prototype, nothing that shows that the thermal management system, the skin cooling, actually works. They can only drive alphas in short bursts and mostly just give people joyrides inside the car park. They had to put a radiator on the Beta so that it could go at least 3 or 4 times around a test track so that they could test suspension and brakes. I've readjusted the laptop so that it's not sitting on my pot belly. If you notice, from up to here, I seem to be wobbling a lot, and that's because the laptop is moving up and down as I try to breathe and talk. Well, I'll try to keep going. I'll get off the reasons why it doesn't make it as an attempt to be the most efficient vehicle, and see if I can move along and say something more about what this guy has to say. This new way isn't working very well for me. I have gone beyond this screen and find that I don't say much. I just watch him like a stunned mullet. And it's not very interesting at all. But I'm going to persevere with it. I've deleted what I've done. I've waited about 4 days, and now I've come back on a cooler morning, put a jumper on and had another go, or am having another go. Let's see how it works out.
Aptera is striving to reduce the losses and achieve the highest possible efficiency in electric vehicle, hence the desire to build a light and aerodynamic car. At steady speed, there are two principal components of resistance: rolling resistance and aerodynamic resistance. Rolling resistance accounts for the impact of the friction and the resistance offered by the tire during rotation. As a good approximation, the force required to overcome rolling resistance is proportional to the weight of the vehicle and the coefficient of the rolling resistance. The greater the vehicle...
I'll just pause here just to say a little bit about rolling resistance. They claim that 3 wheels instead of 4 improves rolling resistance, but it doesn't, because 3 wheels has to carry the same weight as the 4 wheels has to carry. That is the same sprung weight. Now, if you have 4 wheels carrying the same sprung weight, then that force is the same on the road. The other way to improve or make sure that there's the same rolling resistance is to have the 3 original wheels 3/4 of their width and then add the 4th wheel. That way the total width or the patch on the road is the same whether it be 3 or 4 wheels. That way you get the benefit of 4 wheels outside of rolling resistance, all the other benefits of having 4 wheels without losing any rolling resistance. So it's a furphy to say that we have to have 3 wheels instead of 4 to get better rolling resistance is just wrong. I'll keep going.
weight and the higher the tire rolling coefficient, the higher the resistance and more power that is required. Aerodynamic resistance accounts for the energy required to propel the vehicle through the air. Aerodynamic resistance is proportional to the square of the vehicle's speed, and power is proportional to the cube of the speed. Because of this, the aerodynamics will dominate at higher vehicle speeds, where the rolling resistance will dominate at lower speeds. Vehicle weight is the key factor for the rolling resistance, where the vehicle frontal area and its drag coefficient are the key factors for aerodynamic resistance.
Well, I just checked how I went, and I'm getting there. It's very hard to pause the recorder as well as the film I'm watching together and then restart them pretty much together. But we'll see how we go. I've still got to edit it. I may be able to get something right through that part of the process. Now, I must say that I have used earlier days of the first day of trying it this way, and I've only deleted the last one of that from that, the place where you see me wearing a jumper now because it's cooler this morning. So anyway, we're right at the point where he's just said the frontal area is important for aerodynamic resistance. And in their mantra to have the most efficient vehicle ever, what they have done is made a much larger frontal area than they could have by putting the passenger next to the driver. Had they put the passenger behind the driver, they would have had a far greater, or I should say, a far greater advantage, a far smaller frontal area, therefore much lower aerodynamic drag figures. A big mistake, but it wasn't a mistake. They want to fool the gullible, and they want something that will appeal, and so they sacrifice proper efficiency for what people like more. They like to sit beside their driver rather than sit behind their driver. And so because of that, they don't tell you that they're chasing money rather than chasing ultimate efficiency.
Taking into account these factors, Aptera focused on light and aerodynamic chassis. Aptera weighed 65% less than any other electric vehicle today.
65% less than any other electric vehicle today. Well, that's just simply wrong. What about all the e-scooters and e-bikes? I'm sure it's much heavier than those. But China has actual 2- and 4-seater vehicles that are much lighter than this. 65% less is an absolute lie. Well, let's move on and see what he says further down the track.
The body is built with ultra-lightweight composites, and its arched shape mimics the physics of an eggshell. To minimize rolling resistance further, Aptera have chosen profile tires and three-wheeled design that...
Let's talk about the eggshell. Of course, we know the egg is super strong if you put a weight on it when it's standing upright. But it's only super strong standing upright while there are no holes in it. It has to be completely sans holes, devoid of any holes to be strong. Once there's a hole in it, it's weak, very weak. Now, yes, there's an eggshell shape there in the Aptera, but there are 2 doors and a back hatch, and with those massive holes in it, it has a very reduced strength. They claim it's still 7 times stronger than steel, but if you look at the beta prototype, they put a steel roll bar inside it.
Further, Aptera have chosen profile tires and three-wheeled design that will reduce rolling resistance even further when comparing to any other four-wheel electric vehicle. Aptera body shell does resemble of an aircraft shape and achieves record drag coefficient of 0.13. If we look at the battery to wheels efficiency, in-wheel motors that Aptera are using will take it to another level, because in this case you will remove the losses on gearbox, on a reduction gear, etc., as well as improve the efficiency of the braking.
That's completely wrong. While you remove some small linkage parts from having an in-body motor, you create terrible inefficiencies by being in-wheel. The worst of them, and the auto industry knows all about this, is the 50 pounds extra weight that is now unsprung. That causes terrible inefficiencies to the movement of the car. Oh, I shouldn't say car, the auto cycle. The fact that there's no reduction gear means that the motor becomes inefficient in that it has to rev on a one-to-one basis. One revolution of the motor, one revolution of the wheel. You can't avoid it. If you've got a reduction gear, you're able to change that so that the motor revs less than the wheels so that you can get higher top speeds. This is why this is very fast in the initial stage, but very slow and a slow top speed, reduced to 110 miles per hour, simply because it's screaming. And it's the motor that's screaming and will fly apart if it goes much further. So it's restricted to 110 miles per hour, which most of your ordinary cars that mum takes kids to school and back in can do. Most ordinary cars can do 110 miles per hour. So it's a waste of time putting in-wheel motors, or sorry, in-wheel motors into a vehicle if you want it to be efficient on the highway.
But at the same time, you are having a much higher sprung weight in the actual wheel itself. And at the same time, I would like to see how reliable will it be on a longer term use, especially in countries where the roads are not perfect and you have various potholes, etc. Because motor does require quite precise engineering in the motor itself and bearings, but apparently Elafa did lots of testing of this motor and it's proven to be very reliable and works.
Yes, this trust the people that are doing the testing, but I only trust people that are not inside the company that's trying to sell the product. So I don't trust Aptera when they test anything, and I don't trust Elafi when they test anything. You need to have independent bodies test. It's common sense. Otherwise, you can be sold snake oil. They can say, yes, it works well. We've tested it. Or we've done computer simulations and it does this, that, and the other. They don't. You have to have it real and tested independently to know for sure what it can do. You're being sold snake oil when you are told that the people that are selling you something have tested it.
Well, in all sorts of environments, such as cold environment as well as hot environments. If you think this is all the efficiency that Aptera engineers managed to get out of the car, you will be wrong. Aptera has another last trick up its sleeve. So it has embedded solar cells, which will contribute up to 41 miles per day in ideal sunlight conditions. Obviously, most of the drivers will do less than 30 miles per day. Aptera claim that this may allow some drivers to never have to plug in Aptera and never charge. I have to say that, in my opinion, solar panels are a bit of a gimmick on electric cars. If you take into account the efficiency of Aptera, the actual solar panels make sense. Aptera equipped with about 700 watts of solar power, which is not that much, but due to the high efficiency of 10 mile per kilowatt hour, it will give you reasonable savings, and you could save up to 4 miles per day of free driving if you have your Aptera sitting in a car park somewhere and actually charging continuously.
Well, this is where he's actually trusted Aptera's numbers, where they've only ever been computer simulations. The facts are they made 3 alpha vehicles and stuck what we think are little plastic squares that don't have any solar power whatsoever. They tell people, pointing to the vehicles, that this is solar on it, but there is no evidence that that is solar. Nobody has ever seen any of those alphas generate power from the sun. They just are accepting their word. And once again, this is what I call the snake oil. Long after they had built the alphas, in fact, after they had built the beta, they put some of these solar cells, some real ones, in some sort of an oven, something that could take it from high temperatures to low temperatures and test them. But these are testing them more than a year after they claimed that there was solar on the 3 alphas. They're only just starting. And since then, we have no evidence that those cells in the oven actually pass the test. We have no machines that have proven that they can draw any power from the sun. In fact, they're supposed to have a gamma out, and this gamma, the next model after the beta, the next prototype, this gamma was promised more than 3 weeks ago, and they once again have failed to keep their promise. When they do bring out the gamma, I am certain they will not prove that the solar works. I am certain they will not prove that if it's got a 40 kilowatt hour motor, that it will run 400 miles on that battery pack.
For example, in my case, I live in south of England, so it would be equivalent of zone 2, and I do drive about 30 miles per day. And in this case, effectively, I would need to have 2.92 charges per year, which is really incredible. And I would say in this case, solar panels do make sense. Aptera efficiency brings multiple benefits. Power efficiency. It will require less power and will generate less heat. So power required at 70 miles per hour would be estimated at about 7.2 kilowatt. This is theoretical, so if we take this power and transfer it into the wheels, Aptera will get about 85% efficiency. That will be equal to about 9.2 kilowatt to propel the car at that speed. So if we divide the second largest battery pack by 9.2 kilowatt, we get that we can drive at this speed at 4.56 hours. So 4.56 hours multiplied by 70 miles per hour speed, so we'll get about 312 miles, which is really impressive, taking into account that we only spent about 19.2 kilowatt for doing this. So if we look at charging, again, charging is limited by amount of amperage that each cell can take. So if we estimate that value, it would be about 126 amps. So multiplied by 403 volts would be about 50.8 kilowatt. Again, this is not very high value, but if we take into account that Aptera efficiency is about 10 miles per kilowatt hour, the charging speed we will get at this rate will get about 500 miles per hour.
You'll notice they always take into account these claimed values that come out of computer simulations. To date, there is still nothing real. None of the 3 alphas nor the beta have produced any real data. We have nothing to go on, absolutely nothing. We have computer simulations that are wildly imaginary, and the auto industry, with its more than 150 years of experience, has never been able to come near those figures. And now we have a couple of upstarts saying that they've actually said that the auto industry doesn't know what it's doing and that they know better than the auto industry. I don't believe it. I believe that these guys are conning the gullible.
which is absolutely tremendous. Then if we look at the performance, so the estimated pack configuration of Aptera is 96S26P, so 96 cells in serial and 26 in parallel. So basically we will get that continuous discharge current is about 9.7 amp for this type of cell, while maximum discharge current is about 14.45 amps. So if we take this calculation, so we can get continuous power of 82 kilowatt and maximum power of 131 kilowatt, which is not huge, but taking into account the Aptera aerodynamics and weight, so that will give us a similar performance comparable to Tesla Model Y long range, which will require a much bigger pack for this 96S46P, which is equivalent of 300 plus kilowatt peak power. Thank you very much for
Just a little comment about the batteries. I watched quite a few YouTube videos, not about Aptera, but about battery progress. And I can tell you that the batteries chosen for Aptera appear cheap and nasty compared to what they could put in. They could put in more efficient battery packs. Their mantra was to have the most efficient vehicle, and yet they're throwing in stuff that's actually dangerous because it's cheap and nasty. This battery pack is not a very safe thing to be sitting over, and if you had a short in the system, you would be toast. You'd be dead in an instant. Yet this is what they use. They could just use solid state batteries and be 50 times safer. And I think safety is more important than efficiency. But they're just, I don't know. I believe they've chosen the battery pack because they know they're never going to sell one to anybody. Now, this guy's finished. He's used their information. He hasn't verified any of it. And as long as you use their information, you can make it sound appealing. You can make it sound like it's great. But the truth remains is we have nothing. After 4 prototypes and a 5th one that is late, we have nothing that proves anything. It's all computer simulations and big talk. Now, this is why I'm saying it's crunch time. They have a gamut to bring out that's already nearly a month late, and this gamma has to prove with independent testers that it can do anywhere near what the computer simulations claim. The skin cooling won't work. The thermal management system that is part of the skin cooling doesn't appear to be viable at all. The promise that somebody is going to own one by September has now extended again. This is numerous extensions, but this extension now is to the end of this year, that somebody will own one by the end of this year. I think that's completely unreachable. There will be no, be lucky if Gamma comes out in September, but there will be no production models sold in 2022. If I were to think that they could actually solve all the problems that would make it a workable vehicle, I would still think they would need at least till mid-2023 to get one prototype that would pass government and independent testers as a workable machine. But I still don't think that's all that viable. When I first saw Aptera 9 months ago, I thought it might be a second shot at conning the gullible. After watching it closely, everything else I've seen since then has made my thoughts more realistic. And I was open-minded. I was going to go, well, as I see it progress, I could swing and say, well, yes, this is going to work. But it didn't happen. Everything I saw went the wrong way and led me further and further to believe that there will not be an Aptera, right? There will not be an Aptera for sale. It just looks that way. I can't believe people are throwing money at it. I really can't. Now, speaking of money, when they had reached 65 million this second time round, Chris Anthony said, we've got enough to produce the vehicles to go into production. The latest talk, the SEC filings and Steve from Aptera Owners Club and a few others are saying that if they don't get big money investors, they won't have enough money. Everything, of course, while they said at 65 million they had enough to produce, that got more money in. But now they're saying we won't have the money. The first time they failed, I believe the lack of money was a lie. I believe it was because the car didn't work. The vehicle didn't work. It's not a car. I believe that they knew that they couldn't get a viable product and they didn't want to admit that, so they claimed it was lack of funds. And this time around, I still believe that they're going to cover up the fact that the thing never worked and they knew it never could. And the lack of funds is going to be the same lie if they use it. But it is crunch time. I may be wrong. My chances of being wrong are much less now than 8-9 months ago. I may be wrong, but I really believe that the chances are they will not come out with a product that works. They didn't last time, and they won't this time, and the main reason is that the skin cooling doesn't work. Now, how can I end this? I'll be watching closely between now and January 2023, and if they fail to have a sale of one of these silly trikes, they are done for. People should ask for their money back because if they don't, they won't be getting much of it. Well, it's a bad one, but that's all from me for now. Stay safe.